I'm Colonel Harper Vale, 38 years old, and I've spent 15 years leading Marines in operations most people will never hear about. For years, I gave everything to the Corps, time, privacy, even anonymity, to keep others safe. But when a TV reporter looked me in the eye during a base tour and called me cute, mocking the work that had cost lives, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been undervalued or humiliated by someone who had no idea what you'd sacrificed? Tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being dismissed or disrespected, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. The day started with a PR assignment, simple enough. I was instructed to escort a civilian media team through Camp Trident's training sector. Light coverage, they said. Human interest piece. The kind of soft publicity the Corps occasionally tolerates to keep Congress happy and recruitment numbers steady. I should have known better. The moment the white van pulled up to the east gate, I felt something shift in my gut. Call it instinct, call it experience. After 15 years in uniform, you learn to read situations before they unfold. The van door slid open, and out stepped Melissa Crane, senior correspondent for National Focus Network. I recognized her immediately from the evening broadcasts. Sharp suit, sharper smile, the kind of woman who built her career on finding angles nobody else saw. Her eyes scanned me up and down. That half smile appeared, the one that always means trouble. Didn't expect the lead officer to be you, she said, pen already moving across her notepad. I extended my hand. Colonel Harper Vale. Welcome to Camp Trident. She shook it, but her grip was perfunctory. Professional courtesy, nothing more. Behind her, a cameraman and sound tech were unloading equipment, but Melissa's attention stayed fixed on me. Assessing. Calculating. Colonel, she repeated, like she was testing the word. How long have you been in command here? 3 years. We'll start with the training facilities, then move to, and before that, she interrupted. What was your previous assignment? Classified operations overseas. The itinerary I sent your office outlines, classified. She smiled wider. How mysterious. The cameraman, a stocky guy with a graying beard, caught my eye and gave a small apologetic shrug. He'd done this before, knew his boss's routine. I kept my expression neutral and led them toward the first checkpoint. The morning crawled. Every stop became an interrogation disguised as journalism. At the obstacle course, she asked if I'd ever completed it myself. At the firing range, she wondered aloud if I qualified with the same weapons as the men. Her tone stayed light, conversational, but each question carried an edge. You don't look like someone who's seen combat, she said while we watched a training exercise. No offense. None taken, I replied, though we both knew that was a lie. Near the admin building, she paused to let her cameraman adjust his equipment. That's when she turned to her sound tech, a younger woman with pink highlights, and said in a voice just loud enough for me to hear, "Is that real rank or honorary?" The tech looked uncomfortable. I pretended I hadn't heard. By 1100 hours, we'd covered most of the base. The Marines we encountered handled themselves well, professional, articulate, exactly what you'd want representing the Corps. But I noticed Melissa's attention kept drifting back to me. Not to what I was saying, but to how I looked, how I carried myself, searching for some narrative hook she could build her story around. We stopped outside the Tactical Operations Center. Off limits to civilians, but she could film the exterior. While her crew set up, she stepped closer to me, notepad open. So, Colonel Vale, she said, voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. What's it really like? Being a woman in such a male-dominated field? Do you ever feel like you have to work twice as hard to prove yourself? It was a question I'd heard 1,000 times. I gave her the answer I'd perfected over the years, measured, diplomatic, revealing nothing. She wasn't satisfied. But surely there must be moments when gender becomes an issue. When the men under your command question your authority. The Marines under my command follow orders and execute their missions with excellence. That's what matters. Right. She tapped her pen against the notepad. The party line. Before I could respond, her cameraman called out that he was ready. Melissa positioned herself in front of the Tactical Operations Center, adjusted her jacket, and waited for the count. The camera rolled. Her entire demeanor shifted, warmer, more animated, the television personality switching on like a light. "I'm here at Camp Trident," she began, "where the Marine Corps is working to modernize its image and operations. Behind me is the Tactical Operations Center, where some of the military's most sensitive missions are coordinated." She paused, then gestured toward me. "And leading some of those operations is Colonel Harper Vale, one of the few women to command at this level." She turned to me, that smile back in place. "Colonel, can you tell our viewers what it's like to be a female officer leading what some might call black ops missions?" The question hung in the air. Behind the camera, I saw several Marines pause, their attention snapping to us. The term black ops was reckless, inflammatory, and technically inaccurate, but that's exactly why she'd used it. I kept my voice level. "I lead Marines in executing classified operations that support national security. Gender doesn't factor into operational effectiveness. But surely, the Corps selects commanders based on capability and performance. That's the standard, regardless of background." Melissa's smile tightened. She didn't like being shut down on camera. She turned back to the lens, and I saw the moment she made her decision, the shift in her eyes that meant she was going off script. "A female officer leading black ops missions," she said, her tone shifting to something lighter, almost mocking. "Cute." She glanced at her sound tech. "Write that down." The word landed like a slap. Cute. As if everything I'd done, everything I'd earned, could be reduced to something adorable, something small and harmless. As if my rank was a novelty rather than a responsibility purchased with years of sacrifice. The Marines nearby went still. That particular kind of military silence that means something significant just happened. I felt it in the air, saw it in the rigid postures and carefully blank faces. That's when I noticed Captain Reyes. He'd been walking past with a group of junior officers, probably headed to the mess hall. But he'd stopped, frozen mid-step, his face gone pale. His eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my stomach drop. I knew that look. Recognition. And something else, something like shock. Reyes moved forward slowly, breaking away from his group. The other officers watched, confused, as he approached. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was low but carried across the space between us. "Ma'am, you're Viper 1, aren't you?" The way he said it, careful, reverent, like speaking a prayer, made everyone stop. Melissa froze, pen hovering over her notepad. The cameraman's lens dipped slightly. Even the wind seemed to pause. I hadn't heard that call sign in years. Viper 1. Sealed, classified, buried under layers of operational security after what happened in Kandahar. A name that belonged to a different time, a different version of myself, one covered in dust and blood and choices I'd never be able to undo. Rhea's tone carried weight. The kind only people in certain units recognize. Melissa's smile faltered. "Wait, Viper 1? That's..." She looked between us, confusion breaking through her professional veneer. "That's real." I met Rhea's eyes. Saw the memory there, the recognition of something we'd both survived. Then I looked at Melissa, at her camera still rolling, capturing everything. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The silence answered for me. Captain Reyes stood at attention, but his composure had cracked. I could see it in the way his shoulders stayed rigid, the way his breathing had gone shallow. He knew what he'd just done, spoken a classified designation aloud, in front of civilians on camera. But he'd done it anyway, because some truths demand acknowledgement. "At ease, Captain," I said quietly. He didn't relax. Behind him, the junior officers exchanged glances, picking up on the tension but not understanding its source. Melissa Crane, however, had shifted into high alert. Her journalistic instincts had kicked in, recognizing that she'd stumbled onto something bigger than her planned fluff piece. "Viper 1, she repeated, this time testing the words more carefully. "That's an operational call sign?" I didn't answer. The camera was still rolling, and every second of silence was being recorded. Beside Melissa, her cameraman had straightened, his professional detachment replaced by genuine interest. Even the sound tech had stopped adjusting her equipment. Reyes spoke again, his voice steadier now. "Ma'am, I apologize. I didn't mean to, it's fine, Captain." I kept my tone neutral, command voice intact. "Dismissed." He hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but training won out. He saluted, sharp and precise, then turned and walked away. His fellow officers followed, but I caught them glancing back, questions written across their faces. Melissa was already making notes, her pen flying across the page. "Viper 1, she murmured. "And he called you ma'am, with that level of respect." She looked up, eyes bright with the thrill of a potential story. "This is classified, isn't it? Something significant." "We're done here," I said. "The tour is over." "Colonel, wait, your crew has everything they need. Sergeant Dawson will escort you back to the gate." I nodded to the young female Marine who'd been trailing our group, taking notes on the visit. Sergeant Kim Dawson stepped forward immediately. "This way, ma'am." But Melissa wasn't ready to let go. "Colonel Vale, if you've been involved in classified operations, doesn't the public have a right to know the scope of what our military is doing?" "Transparency is, the public has a right to safety," I interrupted, my voice harder now. "Operational security ensures that. If you'll excuse me." I turned and walked away before she could press further. Behind me, I heard Sergeant Dawson firmly directing the media team toward the exit. Good. Dawson was smart, professional, wouldn't let them linger or take unauthorized footage. My office was blessedly empty. I closed the door, stood in the center of the room, and allowed myself exactly 30 seconds to feel the anger coursing through my system. Cute. That word echoed in my head, followed immediately by Reyes speaking my old call sign like it was sacred. Two things that shouldn't exist in the same conversation. Two parts of my life that were never supposed to intersect. I sat at my desk and pulled up the regulations on media interactions. If Melissa aired that footage with the Viper 1 reference, it could trigger a security review. Worst case scenario, it would expose connections between missions that were supposed to stay buried. Best case, it would turn my operational history into entertainment. My phone buzzed. Major Harlan Tate, my aide. "Sir, just got word. The media team is asking questions at the gate. Sergeant Dawson is handling it, but the reporter seems persistent." "What kind of questions?" "Wants to know about operational call signs, classified mission designations, whether you've been deployed to active combat zones." Tate's voice carried his usual dry humor. "I think she smells blood in the water. Keep them contained. No additional access, no follow-up materials. Already done. And sir," he paused. For what it's worth, half the base heard what Captain Reyes said. Words spreading fast. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. Nothing stayed secret on a military base for long, despite all our protocols and clearances. "Let it spread," I said. "Better they hear it from each other than from a news broadcast." I ended the call and opened my email. Sure enough, there was already a message from General Monroe's office, marked urgent. The subject line read, "Media Incident Report Required." I spent the next hour drafting the report, choosing each word carefully. Factual, professional, leaving out the personal sting of being called cute, like I was a child playing dress-up in my father's uniform. Leaving out the way my chest had tightened when Reyes spoke that name I'd tried so hard to leave behind. By evening, the clip had already been uploaded to social media. Not the official broadcast, that wouldn't air until tomorrow, but someone from Melissa's crew had leaked a 30-second snippet. The footage showed her saying cute, showed the Marines' reactions, showed Reyes stepping forward. But the audio cut out before he said my call sign. Deliberately, I suspected. Melissa was saving that reveal for the official broadcast, building anticipation. The comments section was already filling with speculation and outrage. Some defended me, calling out Melissa's condescension. Others mocked the whole situation, turned it into gender politics theater. A few veterans jumped in, cryptically referencing operational call signs, and those who know. None of them actually knew. Not really. I closed the browser and sat in the dark office, watching the sun set through the window. Camp Trident spread out before me, Orderly rows of buildings, training fields, the organized chaos of military life. This place had been my command for 3 years. I'd earned respect here, built something solid. And tomorrow, Melissa Crane was going to reduce it all to a punchline. My phone buzzed again. A text message from an unknown number. "They'll never understand, ma'am." But we do. No signature, but I knew who it was from. Reyes. He'd found my personal number somehow, probably through channels I didn't want to think about too carefully. I stared at the message for a long moment. He was right. The civilians watching tomorrow's broadcast would never understand what Viper 1 meant. They'd never know about the extraction that failed, the men we lost, the ones we saved. They'd never feel the weight of command decisions made under fire, when every choice means someone lives or dies. But the people who'd been there understood. And maybe that had to be enough. I typed a brief reply, "Understood. Thank you, Captain." Then I turned off my phone, locked my office, and walked across the base to my quarters. Marines saluted as I passed, their faces carefully neutral. They'd all heard something by now, rumors, speculation, fragments of truth mixed with fiction. Tomorrow, the whole country would hear Melissa's version of events. Her narrative, her spin, her carefully edited portrayal of the cute female colonel who apparently led Black Ops missions. I thought about damage control, about official responses and public relations strategies. But underneath all that professional analysis, one thought kept surfacing. She had no right. No right to speak that call sign, to pry into operations she couldn't begin to understand, to turn service into spectacle. I'd spent my career in the shadows, exactly where I needed to be. And tomorrow, Melissa Crane was going to drag me into the light, not to honor what I'd done, but to monetize it. Inside my quarters, I pulled out an old photograph I kept in my desk drawer. 6 Marines, covered in dust and exhaustion, standing in front of a damaged transport vehicle. Kandahar, 5 years ago. The night everything changed. 3 of those faces were gone now. Different missions, different circumstances, but gone just the same. The remaining 3 were scattered across the globe, carrying on with the quiet work that never makes headlines. Until tomorrow, when their commander becomes a trending topic. I placed the photograph back in the drawer and closed it firmly. Whatever happened next, whatever Melissa broadcast to the world, wouldn't change what actually mattered. The missions completed, the lives saved, the work still ahead. Let her have her story. The real one belonged to those of us who lived it. 5 years earlier, I wasn't Colonel Harper Vale. I was just Lieutenant Harper Vale, an intelligence officer stationed at Forward Operating Base Keaton in Kandahar Province, running reconnaissance units through some of the most hostile territory in Afghanistan. The call sign came later. First, I was just another officer trying to keep her team alive. FB Keaton sat in a strategic valley position, close enough to supply routes to matter, remote enough to feel like the edge of the world. My unit consisted of 12 Marines conducting intelligence-gathering missions, mapping insurgent movements, identifying weapons caches, building the kind of detailed operational picture that kept larger forces from walking into ambushes. It was tedious work, exhausting, and critically important. Captain Daniel Reyes had arrived in March, transferred from an infantry unit after his previous deployment. He was good, focused, competent, the kind of Marine who executed orders efficiently and didn't waste time on complaints. We developed the professional respect that comes from working in high-stress environments where competence matters more than personality. "Lieutenant," he'd said during one pre-mission briefing, "you mind if I suggest a different approach to the eastern route?" "Go ahead." He'd outlined a modification to our patrol pattern, something that would give us better visibility while reducing our exposure time. It was smart, tactically sound. "Good catch," I'd told him. "We'll implement it." That was our relationship. Professional, efficient, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Nothing dramatic, nothing memorable, just 2 people doing their jobs well. Until September 19th. The mission parameters were straightforward. Insert at dusk, observe a suspected weapons transfer point, extract before dawn. 6-person team, minimal equipment, standard recon protocol. I'd run the same type of mission dozens of times. We moved through the village on foot, silent and careful. Reyes took point with Corporal Martinez. I stayed in the middle with our communications specialist, Lance Corporal Kim. 2 more Marines covered our rear. The weapons cache was exactly where intelligence had predicted. We documented everything: photographs, coordinates, estimated inventory. Textbook operation. We were preparing to extract when everything fell apart. The explosion came from the north. Not close enough to hit us directly, but close enough to know we'd been compromised. Someone had spotted us, or we'd tripped a sensor we'd missed. Either way, our extraction route was now a combat zone. Viper 3, this is Viper 6, I spoke into my radio, using our mission call signs. We're blown. Need immediate extract, alternate location. Static. Then more explosions, closer now. Viper 6, Viper 3. Negative on extraction. Zone is hot, multiple hostiles engaged. You're on your own for now. On your own. 3 words that change everything. I looked at my team. 5 faces watching me, waiting for orders, trusting that I knew what to do next. Reyes met my eyes with that calm readiness I'd come to rely on. We move south, I said. Through the agriculture sector, avoid the main routes. Stay tight, stay quiet. We moved fast but controlled, using what cover we could find. Behind us, gunfire erupted, the sound of our extraction team engaged with hostiles. We couldn't help them. Our job was to survive and get intel back to base. 2 kilometers into our alternate route, Martinez went down. Sniper, somewhere in the hills we couldn't see. He died before we could reach him. Keep moving, I ordered, hating the words even as I spoke them. We couldn't stop, couldn't retrieve his body, couldn't do anything except keep moving and hope we'd make it far enough to call for help. The next 4 hours blurred together. We navigated through hostile territory in the dark, avoiding patrols, taking fire twice more. Lost Lance Corporal Kim in the second engagement. He'd provided cover while we crossed an exposed section. Took 3 rounds before we could suppress the enemy position. By the time we found defensible ground to call for extraction again, there were only 4 of us left. Me, Reyes, and 2 others whose names I still see in my dreams. I got on the radio, voice hoarse from dust and fear. Any station, this is Viper 6. We are 4 souls, urgent extraction required. This time, someone answered. Viper 6, authenticate. I gave our codes, our position, everything they needed to verify we were who we claimed to be and not an enemy trap. Copy, Viper 6. Air support inbound, 15 minutes. Call sign for this operation is Viper 1. Hold position. Viper 1. The designation for the team leader coordinating our rescue. Except there was no separate rescue team, it was just us, holding ground and praying our 15 minutes didn't become 16. Reyes set up defensive positions while I maintained radio contact. The other 2 Marines, Sergeant Brooks and Private First Class Anderson, covered our flanks. We were exhausted, low on ammunition, running on nothing but adrenaline and stubborn refusal to die in that valley. The helicopters came in hot, door guns firing to suppress any hostiles in the area. We loaded fast, Brooks, Anderson, Reyes, then me. I was the last one on board, watching our position shrink below us as we gained altitude. Martinez and Kim stayed behind. We'd recover their bodies later, but in that moment, they were just gone. 2 empty spaces where Marines used to be. Back at FB Keaton, the debrief took hours. Every detail examined, every decision questioned, every casualty analyzed. The intelligence we gathered was valuable enough that Command considered the mission successful despite our losses. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed. 2 Marines dead under my command. 2 families who'd get notifications and folded flags and the kind of grief that never really heals. Colonel Briggs, our commanding officer, found me later that night sitting outside the communications tent, staring at nothing. Lieutenant Vale, he said, sitting down beside me without asking permission. You did everything right. 2 Marines are dead, sir. 2 Marines died completing their mission. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. The radio operator who coordinated your extraction used the call sign Viper 1. You know why? I shook my head. Because in that moment, you became the operation. Your team, your leadership, your decisions. Viper 1 wasn't the rescue coordination, it was you, keeping your people alive long enough to be rescued. The name stuck. The teams that heard the radio traffic, the pilots who pulled you out, they started calling you that. Viper 1. The lieutenant who brought her people home. I didn't bring all of them home. No, he agreed. You didn't. But you brought home the ones you could. That's what leadership is, Lieutenant. Making the hard calls and living with the consequences. The name followed me after that. Other units heard the story, some accurate, some exaggerated, all focused on the same core facts. Marines lost, Marines saved, officer who made it happen. Viper 1 became less of a call sign and more of a designation. A reputation. I didn't want it. I'd have traded every accolade, every commendation, every recognition to have Martinez and Kim back. But I didn't get that choice. So I carried the name forward. Wore it like armor, like responsibility, like a reminder of what command actually costs. Reyes understood, because he'd been there. He'd seen me make those decisions, seen me carry the weight of them afterward. The others who survived understood too, in their own ways. We'd all left pieces of ourselves in that valley. When I rotated stateside 3 months later, the call signs stayed sealed in mission files. Classified. Buried under operational security protocols that meant Viper 1 officially never existed. I'd built a career after that. Rose through ranks, took new commands, led other missions I couldn't discuss. But I never forgot where the name came from. Never forgot Martinez calling out coordinates before the sniper round hit him. Never forgot Kim's last words over the radio, "Go, ma'am. We'll cover." That's what Melissa Crane didn't understand when she called me cute. That's what she couldn't grasp, standing in her perfect suit with her camera crew, reducing my service to entertainment. She saw a woman in uniform. I saw the ghosts of everyone I'd failed to bring home. And now, 5 years later, Captain Reyes had spoken that name aloud again. Not as gossip, not as nostalgia, but as recognition. A reminder that some of us remembered what it actually meant. I sat in my quarters at Camp Trident, thousands of miles from that valley in Kandahar, and felt the weight of it all over again. The past wasn't past. It was always there, always waiting, always ready to surface when someone said the wrong thing or asked the wrong question. Tomorrow, Melissa would broadcast her story. She'd tell the version she wanted to tell, complete with her cute commentary and whatever spin would generate the most views. But she'd never tell the real story. That one belonged to Martinez and Kim, to Reyes and Brooks and Anderson. To the ones who were there when it mattered, who knew what we'd actually lost and what we'd somehow managed to save. Let her have her headlines. The truth lived somewhere deeper, somewhere cameras couldn't reach. The broadcast aired at 1900 hours. I didn't watch it live, heard about it from Major Tate, who'd been monitoring media coverage as part of his duties. "Sir," he said over the phone, his usual dry humor strained. "You should probably see this." He sent me the link. I watched it alone in my office, door locked, phone silenced. Melissa Crane's piece had been edited into a 5-minute segment for the evening news. The opening shot showed Camp Trident at sunrise, inspiring music playing over footage of Marines training. Standard military propaganda imagery, designed to make civilians feel good about defense spending. Then Melissa appeared on screen, standing in front of the Tactical Operations Center. "The modern military is changing," she narrated, with more women taking leadership roles in traditionally male-dominated fields. But what happens when image clashes with reality? The footage cut to me, caught mid-sentence during one of our stops. The editing made me look stiff, uncomfortable, defensive. They'd spliced together responses from different questions to make it seem like I was dodging simple inquiries. Then came the moment. Melissa's voice, casual and dismissive, a female officer leading Black Ops missions. Cute. The camera caught my expression, a flash of something before I'd locked it down. Anger, maybe, or hurt. Something vulnerable that I'd let slip for half a second before training reasserted control. They'd slowed it down. Made it dramatic. Turned my momentary reaction into proof of some narrative about women being too emotional for command. But they'd cut out what came next. No footage of the Marines going silent. No audio of Reyes saying my call sign. Instead, Melissa's voiceover continued. Colonel Harper Vale has served with distinction, but questions remain about the appropriateness of placing women in the most dangerous and secretive military operations. When asked about her background, Vale became defensive, refusing to discuss her previous assignments. Sources indicate she may have been involved in classified operations that have never been publicly disclosed. The screen showed my face again, expression neutral, giving nothing away. Melissa kept talking. While the military insists gender doesn't affect operational capability, veterans I spoke with suggest that female officers face additional scrutiny and skepticism from their male counterparts. Vale's defensive posture during our interview suggests she's acutely aware of this dynamic. Defensive posture. They'd turned my professionalism into weakness, my refusal to discuss classified information into evasion. The segment ended with Melissa standing in front of a generic office building, delivering her conclusion. The military's commitment to diversity is commendable, but perhaps placing women in roles that require them to prove themselves constantly isn't the progressive stance it appears to be. Sometimes the most feminist choice is acknowledging limitations rather than forcing equality where it may not serve anyone's interests. The implication was clear. Women like me were tokens, symbols, cute little attempts at diversity that ultimately didn't belong in real military operations. I closed the video and sat in silence. Within 20 minutes, the clip had been shared across social media. Comments poured in, some defending me, most debating whether women should serve in combat roles, a significant minority mocking the entire situation with memes and jokes. The cute face of classified command became a headline on 3 different news sites. Someone created a parody social media account using that name. The internet had taken Melissa's narrative and amplified it into something grotesque. My personal email inbox filled with messages. Some supportive, from veterans and military families who saw through Melissa's framing. Others hostile, from people who agreed that women didn't belong in combat leadership. A disturbing number were crude, sexual, threatening. I didn't read most of them. Just scanned enough to understand the scope of what was happening. General Monroe called at 2100 hours. Colonel Vale, he said, voice carefully neutral. I've seen the broadcast. Yes, sir. Command is issuing a statement. We won't engage with the specifics, but will affirm our confidence in all personnel serving at Camp Trident. He paused. How are you holding up? It was the first time anyone had asked me that directly. The question hit harder than I expected. Managing, sir. You don't have to manage, Harper. You can be pissed off. God knows I am. The use of my first name was deliberate, a signal that this was off the record. General Monroe had always been fair, professional, someone who evaluated performance without bias. Having his support mattered more than I wanted to admit. She lied, sir. Edited the footage to tell a completely different story than what happened. I know. Legal is reviewing our options, but between us, there's not much we can do. She didn't technically defame you, just spun the narrative in a direction we can't easily counter without revealing classified information. Which was the trap. Melissa had been smart enough to stay just inside the boundaries of what she could legally claim while implying things she couldn't prove. And any attempt to refute her characterization would require me to discuss operations I wasn't authorized to disclose. The best response is no response, Monroe continued. Don't give interviews, don't engage on social media, don't try to correct the record. Let it fade naturally. And if it doesn't fade, then we deal with that when it comes. For now, focus on your command. Show through your actions what you couldn't say in that interview. We talked logistics for a few more minutes, security concerns, potential media follow-up requests, contingency plans if the situation escalated. Professional, practical, the kind of conversation that let me focus on problems I could actually solve. After hanging up, I found myself staring at my computer screen, cursor hovering over my email inbox. One message caught my attention. Subject line just said, Viper. I opened it. Ma'am, the story she told isn't the one that matters. The ones who know what you did, what you sacrificed, we're still here. We remember. And we'll make sure others remember too, when it's safe to tell the real story. Stay strong. Reyes, I read it 3 times. Simple words, but they cracked something inside me I'd been keeping locked down since the broadcast aired. The ones who know. Martinez and Kim didn't get to know. They died before the call sign became more than just mission coordination. But Reyes knew. Brooks and Anderson knew, wherever they were serving now. The pilots who'd extracted us, the command staff who'd read the after-action reports, the other intelligence officers who'd worked those same valleys, they all knew pieces of the story Melissa would never understand. I typed a brief reply, "Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know." Then I shut down my computer and sat in the dark office, watching lights flicker across the base through my window. Marines moving between buildings, vehicles conducting routine patrols, the ordinary mechanics of military life continuing despite whatever drama was unfolding on television screens across the country. Tomorrow, I'd face my command. I'd walk through Camp Trident with my head up, my uniform pressed, my demeanor exactly as professional as it had always been. I'd show every Marine under my authority that outside noise didn't affect our mission, didn't shake our focus, didn't matter compared to the work we were here to do. But tonight, alone in my office, I let myself feel the betrayal. Not just Melissa's distortion of facts, but the deeper wound of having my service reduced to spectacle. Every mission I'd run, every decision I'd made, every sacrifice I'd accepted, all of it now filtered through her lens of cute female officer trying to prove herself. She'd taken something I'd earned through blood and exhaustion and loss and turned it into entertainment. Made it smaller, made it questionable, made it about gender politics instead of operational effectiveness. The anger felt clean, sharp, justified. I sat with it, acknowledged it, then deliberately set it aside. Because anger wouldn't change the narrative. Anger wouldn't restore my privacy or undo the broadcast. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford if I wanted to keep doing my job effectively. So I filed it away with all the other things I couldn't afford to feel, stood up, straightened my uniform, and walked out of my office like nothing had changed. Even though everything had. 3 weeks after the broadcast, Melissa Crane requested a follow-up interview. The email came through official channels, routed to public affairs and forwarded to my desk with a note from Major Tate. "Thought you'd want to see this before I send the standard rejection." I read it twice, analyzing every word the way I'd been trained to analyze intelligence reports. "Dear Colonel Vale," it began, professional and measured. "I understand my previous coverage may have caused some discomfort, and for that I apologize. However, I believe there's an opportunity here for a more nuanced conversation about women in military leadership. The public response to our segment has been significant, with many people expressing genuine curiosity about your background and service. A follow-up interview could help humanize the issues we touched on and provide you with a platform to share your perspective in your own words." Humanize. As if I were currently inhuman, a caricature rather than a person. "I'd like to propose a longer format piece," the email continued, "perhaps 30 minutes, where we could discuss your career trajectory, the challenges you've faced, and what you'd like young women considering military service to know. This would be an opportunity to take control of your narrative and inspire the next generation." Control of my narrative. The phrase was almost funny, given how completely she'd controlled the first narrative. "I believe we can work together to create something meaningful," she concluded. "Please consider this request carefully. The conversation is happening whether you participate or not. This way, you'd have a voice in shaping it." A threat disguised as an invitation. Participate or watch while she continued discussing me without my input. I forwarded the email to General Monroe with a single line, "Recommend declining. Please advise if you disagree." His response came within an hour, "Concur." Well handled. Major Tate drafted the official rejection, polite, brief, offering no explanation beyond Colonel Vale's operational commitments don't permit media interviews at this time. Standard military deflection that revealed nothing. But Melissa didn't accept it quietly. 2 days later, she appeared at Camp Trident's main gate, no camera crew, no official appointment. Just her and a rental car, asking to speak with me personally. The gate guard called my office. "Ma'am, we have a Melissa Crane requesting access. Says it's urgent and personal." "Denied," I said immediately. "Standard visitor protocols apply. No appointment, no access." "Yes, ma'am." I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Melissa waited at the gate for 3 hours. When that didn't work, she contacted several of my subordinates through social media, trying to arrange informal meetings. When that failed, she reached out to Marines who'd appeared briefly in her original footage, offering payment for interviews about their experiences serving under my command. Sergeant Dawson reported the contact attempt during our weekly briefing. "Ma'am, this reporter offered me $2,000 to talk about what it's like having a female commanding officer. Said she just wanted the truth, that you'd been preventing people from speaking freely." I kept my expression neutral. "What did you tell her?" "Told her to redirect all inquiries through public affairs, ma'am. But she's persistent. Said she'd triple the amount if I'd go on camera." "Did anyone accept?" "Not that I know of, ma'am. Most of us are just ignoring her messages." But the pressure was building. I could feel it in the way Marines looked at me during morning formations, wondering if I'd address the situation. Could hear it in the careful neutrality of how staff officers discussed media requests. The story wasn't fading naturally like General Monroe had hoped. Melissa was keeping it alive, feeding it, pushing for more. On the 4th day after her gate appearance, she published an opinion piece in a national newspaper. The headline read, "Why won't Colonel Vale talk? The problem with military secrecy and female leadership." The article argued that my refusal to engage proved something sinister. Either I was hiding inadequacy, or the military was protecting me from scrutiny it would demand of male officers. She framed my silence as evidence of weakness, suggesting that truly confident female leaders would welcome the opportunity to discuss their experiences. "Perhaps the real issue," she wrote, "is that Colonel Vale knows her credentials can't withstand examination. By hiding behind operational security and refusing dialogue, she perpetuates the very skepticism she claims to oppose. If we're going to have women in combat leadership, they need to be transparent about their qualifications and willing to defend their positions publicly." It was expertly crafted manipulation. Every sentence technically defensible, every implication carefully constructed to avoid direct accusation. She'd turned my adherence to security protocols into suspicious behavior, my professionalism into cowardice. The comments section exploded with debate. Feminists arguing both sides, some defending my right to privacy, others agreeing that female leaders had a responsibility to be visible role models. Veterans mostly defending me, but a vocal minority questioning whether I was actually qualified or just a diversity promotion. Civilians treating the whole thing like entertainment, another culture war skirmish to pick sides on. Major Tate found me in my office that evening, the newspaper article pulled up on his tablet. "Sir, this is escalating. She's not letting it go." "I see that. Public affairs is getting flooded with requests. Everyone wants a statement now. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they're all asking for your side of the story." I leaned back in my chair, studying the ceiling tiles. "What's your assessment, Major?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Tactically, she's backed us into a corner. Respond, and we legitimize her narrative. Stay silent, and she controls the story unchallenged. Either way, she wins. There's always a third option. Which is, let her win the battle and focus on winning the war." I looked at him directly. "She wants a response, wants engagement, wants me to play her game. What if I just don't? She'll keep pushing. Let her. Eventually, there's nothing new to say. No new angle to exploit. She'll have to either repeat herself or move on to the next story." Tate frowned. "That could take months, sir. In the meantime, your reputation takes hits every time she publishes something." "My reputation with who? Civilians who've never served? Media personalities looking for content?" I shook my head. "The people whose opinions actually matter, the Marines I command, the officers I work with, the veterans who understand operational security, they already know the truth." "And the next generation?" "The women considering military service who see you being attacked." That question hit harder. I'd spent years mentoring young female officers, showing them through example that they belonged here, that they could succeed without compromising their integrity. What message did my silence send? "I can't control what Melissa Crane says about me," I said slowly. "But I can control how I respond. And the lesson I want those young women to learn is that you don't have to justify yourself to everyone who questions you. Sometimes strength is refusing to engage with people who don't respect your service. Tate considered this, then nodded. I'll draft talking points for public affairs. Something brief they can use when reporters keep asking. Keep it simple. Colonel Vale is focused on her command responsibilities. We don't comment on individual officers' career histories beyond publicly available information. That's it. That's it. He left, but I stayed in my office, staring at Melissa's article on my screen. She'd called me a coward, essentially. Suggested I was hiding inadequacy behind security clearances. Part of me wanted to respond, wanted to lay out everything I'd done, every mission completed, every commendation earned. Wanted to force her to acknowledge that I'd earned my rank through the same blood and sacrifice as any male officer. But that would mean playing her game. Opening my service record to public debate. Turning my career into a referendum on whether women belonged in combat leadership. I'd spent 15 years proving I belonged. Not to journalists, not to social media commentators, not to anyone except the Marines who depended on my judgment and leadership. Their trust was earned through actions, not words. Through decisions made under pressure, not sound bites designed for television. If Melissa wanted to question my qualifications from outside the fence, let her. Inside the fence, where it actually mattered, people knew who I was and what I'd done. My email pinged. Another message from an unknown sender. Subject line, Solidarity. Colonel, I'm a female Marine captain stationed overseas. Just wanted you to know that what you're dealing with resonates with all of us. We see what she's doing, how she's trying to use you to push her agenda. Your silence is powerful. It shows we don't owe explanations to people who've never worn the uniform. Thank you for standing firm. Captain J. Morrison. I read it 3 times, then saved it in a folder I'd created specifically for messages like this. There were dozens now, from active duty personnel and veterans, men and women, all saying essentially the same thing. We see you, we support you, we know the real story. Those messages mattered more than any opinion piece Melissa could write. The next morning, I attended a promotion ceremony for one of my junior officers. Lieutenant Blake Owens was moving up to captain, and I had the honor of pinning on his new rank. During the ceremony, I noticed several Marines watching me with unusual intensity, clearly wondering if the media storm had affected my demeanor. I made my remarks brief and professional, focused entirely on Owens' achievements and what they meant for his career trajectory. No references to recent events, no acknowledgement of the noise outside our gates. After the ceremony, Owens approached me privately. Ma'am, thank you for the promotion. And I just want to say, what that reporter is doing is wrong. A lot of us have been talking, and we want you to know we have your back. I appreciate that, Captain. Now tell me about your new assignment. The subject change was deliberate. I didn't need declarations of loyalty or support. I needed Marines focused on their missions, not distracted by media drama. But Owens persisted, lowering his voice. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted. You've taught me more about leadership in 2 years than any textbook or training course. The way you handle pressure, make decisions, take care of your people, that's real leadership. And watching you refuse to engage with someone trying to bait you into a fight? That's a lesson too. Sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. I met his eyes, saw genuine respect there. Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know. He saluted, sharp and sincere, then walked away to join his family for the post-ceremony reception. Standing there in my dress uniform, surrounded by Marines celebrating professional achievement, I felt something shift. Melissa could write 100 articles questioning my qualifications. Social media could debate my competence endlessly. None of it would change what actually mattered, the work we did here, the standards we maintained, the mission we served. My phone buzzed. Major Tate, with a message that made me smile despite everything. Melissa Crane just posted on social media that she's disappointed but not surprised by your continued silence. Translation: she's running out of material. Good. Let her run dry. Let the story fade because there was nothing left to say. I had more important things to do than feed a narrative designed to diminish my service. I had Marines to lead. 2 months after the initial broadcast, something unexpected happened. The story that wouldn't die suddenly began to transform. It started with a military blog post written by a retired Army colonel named Sarah Michaels. She'd served in Iraq and Afghanistan, commanded battalion-level operations, and had no direct connection to me. Her post, titled "The Silence We Choose," analyzed my refusal to engage with Melissa Crane's coverage. Colonel Vale's decision to maintain operational security and professional boundaries isn't weakness, Michaels wrote. It's the kind of disciplined leadership we should expect from senior officers. The media doesn't get to dictate when or how military personnel discuss classified operations. The fact that a reporter is frustrated by this speaks to her inexperience with actual military culture, not to any deficiency in Vale's leadership. The post went viral within veteran communities. Other retired officers began sharing their perspectives, many pointing out that male officers routinely declined media requests without facing the same scrutiny I'd received. The conversation was shifting, slowly, from questioning my qualifications to questioning the media's approach. Melissa responded with another article, but this time the tone was different. Defensive. She accused veteran communities of circling the wagons to protect one of their own, suggested that military culture was too insular to accept legitimate criticism. But she'd miscalculated. Veterans across branches, genders, and political affiliations pushed back. Not necessarily defending me personally, most didn't know me, but defending the principle that operational security mattered more than public curiosity. I watched it unfold from a distance, maintaining my silence, letting others make the arguments I couldn't make myself. Then, 3 months after the original broadcast, I received an email that changed everything. The sender was Melissa Crane. The subject line read simply, "Apology." I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. "Colonel Vale," it began, and the tone was immediately different from her previous communications. "I've spent the past few weeks doing something I should have done before our initial interview, actually researching military culture, speaking with veterans, trying to understand the context I so clearly missed. I was wrong. Not just in how I covered your story, but in my fundamental approach to military journalism. I came to Camp Trident looking for a specific narrative about women in combat leadership, and I let that preconception blind me to what was actually in front of me. When I called you cute, I was being condescending. I see that now. I treated your rank and position as novelty rather than earned achievement. I didn't understand the significance of operational call signs, the weight of classified service, or the very real reasons why officers can't simply be transparent about their backgrounds. I've been speaking with retired officers, reading after-action reports from similar operations, trying to understand what kinds of missions might earn someone a classified designation. I can't know specifics, obviously, but I can now grasp the general context, and it's not cute. It's serious work with serious consequences, and I trivialized it for ratings. I'm writing a follow-up piece. Not an interview request. I understand why you can't participate. But a genuine examination of military operational security, the media's responsibility when covering classified operations, and an acknowledgement of where I went wrong. I'd like to include a statement from you if you're willing, but I'll publish either way. This isn't about getting your participation. It's about correcting my own failures. I've attached a draft. You're under no obligation to read it or respond. But if you do have feedback, I'll genuinely consider it. I'm sorry for the dismissive tone, the edited footage that misrepresented our interaction, and for not doing my job with the professionalism you showed in yours. Melissa Crane, the attachment was a 3,000-word article. I read it carefully, analyzing every paragraph for hidden agenda or subtle manipulation. I found none. The piece was honest, uncomfortably so. Melissa detailed her thought process during the original interview, acknowledged how her preconceptions had shaped her coverage, and laid out what she'd learned in the months since. She interviewed retired intelligence officers who explained, in general terms, what kinds of missions might require operational call signs. She spoke with female veterans about the challenges of media coverage that turned their service into gender politics theater. And she was direct about her mistakes. I treated Colonel Vale as a symbol rather than a person, she wrote. I wanted her to represent something, either successful diversity or failed tokenism, depending on how the interview went. I never considered that she might simply be a competent officer doing her job, with no obligation to satisfy my narrative needs. When Captain Reyes recognized her with obvious respect, I should have understood I was missing critical context. Instead, I saw it as mysterious intrigue, something to build drama around. I failed as a journalist by prioritizing story over truth. The article concluded with a section about operational security and why the public's right to know had legitimate limits when it came to ongoing military operations. "We can't have it both ways," Melissa wrote. "We can't demand that our military protect national security while simultaneously demanding that individual officers expose classified information to satisfy media curiosity." Colonel Vale's refusal to discuss her background wasn't evasion. It was exactly what we should want from officers entrusted with sensitive operations. I read the draft twice more, then sat back in my chair. It was good. Better than good, it was the kind of journalism that actually served the public by providing context and nuance instead of just controversy. But it also meant engaging with Melissa again, giving her access to my response, trusting that she'd represent it honestly this time. I called General Monroe. "Sir, I need guidance on a media situation." I explained the email, the draft article, the apparent genuine shift in Melissa's approach. Monroe was quiet for a long moment. "What's your instinct?" "That she's sincere. That she actually learned something and wants to correct the record." "And if you're wrong? If this is just a more sophisticated manipulation, then I'm wrong and we deal with it. But if I'm right, this could actually close the story instead of letting it linger indefinitely." "Send me the draft," Monroe said. "Let me review it with our legal team and public affairs. If they don't see red flags, I'll authorize you to provide a brief statement." The approval came back within 24 hours. The legal team found no concerns with Melissa's draft, and General Monroe gave permission for me to respond with a carefully limited statement. I spent an hour crafting 3 paragraphs. Military service requires a balance between transparency and operational security. I appreciate Ms. Crane's effort to understand that balance and to examine her initial coverage with critical perspective. Officers in sensitive positions must make difficult decisions about what can and cannot be discussed publicly. Our obligation is to national security first, public perception second. I'm grateful to serve alongside dedicated professionals across all branches, and I hope media coverage of military operations will continue to prioritize accuracy and context over sensationalism. Professional, measured, revealing nothing while acknowledging her effort. I sent it to Melissa with a brief note. "You may use this statement in your article. No further comment will be provided." Her response came within an hour. "Thank you, Colonel. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I promise to honor it this time." The article published 2 weeks later in a major magazine, much longer and more prominent than her original television segment. The headline read, "What I Got Wrong About Colonel Harper Vale and Why Military Journalism Needs to Change." It was everything her draft had promised. Honest, self-critical, informative. She included my statement without editorializing, let it stand on its own merits. The piece generated significant discussion, but this time the conversation was productive, about media responsibility, operational security, the complexity of covering military affairs. Several journalism schools reached out to Melissa for speaking engagements about the piece. She used those platforms to discuss the importance of understanding institutional cultures before covering them, the danger of bringing preconceptions to stories, the journalist's obligation to truth over narrative. I didn't watch those appearances or read most of the follow-up coverage, but Major Tate kept me informed of the general trajectory. "Sir, the narrative has shifted. You're no longer the story. Media's relationship with military culture is the story." Melissa's self-examination gave everyone permission to look at the bigger issues. That was exactly what I'd hoped for. 6 months after the original broadcast, I received one more email from Melissa. "Colonel Vale, I know you probably don't want to hear from me again, but I wanted you to know I've been assigned to cover the Pentagon long-term. Actually covering military affairs properly, not just parachuting in for controversy. Everything I learned from my failure with your story has changed how I approach this beat. I'll never be able to fully make up for what I did, but I'm trying to do better work going forward. That's partly because of you, because you refused to let me bait you into my narrative and forced me to confront my own shortcomings. Thank you for that lesson. I didn't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it. I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. But I did save the email, filed next to the messages from Marines and veterans who'd supported me through the worst of it. Not because I'd forgiven Melissa, forgiveness wasn't really the point. But because it represented something important, the possibility of growth, even from people who'd failed spectacularly. She'd never understand what Viper 1 actually meant. Never know the specifics of what happened in that valley or what it cost me and my team. But she'd learned something about the weight of service, the necessity of discretion, the complexity of leadership in classified environments. That was enough. The story was finally over. Not with vindication or victory, but with something better, understanding, however incomplete. I could live with that. 8 months after the broadcast, I stood in front of a room full of officers at a multinational training event. Joint operations between U.S. forces and allied militaries, the kind of event designed to build cooperation and share tactical knowledge. I was there to present on intelligence integration during complex operations, technical stuff, the kind of briefing I'd given dozens of times. Nothing personal, nothing dramatic. Just professional expertise shared among professionals. The event coordinator introduced me using standard protocol, rank, current position, brief service background. Then he paused, glanced at his notes, and added something unexpected. And for those of you familiar with certain operations in the Kandahar region, Colonel Vale served under the operational designation Viper 1. The room went still. Different than the silence at Camp Trident when Reyes had said it. This was recognition from people who understood operational call signs, who'd maybe heard rumors through classified channels, who knew that certain designations only got assigned when something significant happened. I kept my expression neutral, gave no reaction. The coordinator moved on quickly, and I launched into my presentation about intelligence protocols and command coordination. But something had shifted. The officers in the room looked at me differently now, not with curiosity or skepticism, but with the particular respect military personnel reserve for those who've been tested under fire. After the presentation, during the break, several officers approached. A British colonel asked technical questions about integration protocols. A German major wanted to discuss risk assessment matrices. A Canadian captain had follow-up questions about communication hierarchies. All professional, all focused on the content of my briefing. But there was an undertone of recognition, acknowledgement of something unspoken. Then Captain Reyes appeared at the back of the room. I hadn't known he'd be at this event. He waited until the others had dispersed before approaching. "Ma'am," he said, standing at attention. "At ease, Captain. I didn't expect to see you here. Last-minute addition to the training cadre. I was asked to co-present on infantry tactics later this week." He paused, then said quietly, "I hope it was okay that the coordinator used your call sign." He asked me about it beforehand, said he'd heard it mentioned in operational planning documents. I told him it was accurate, but suggested he keep the context minimal. It was fine, I said, and meant it. Different audience than a civilian camera crew. "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated, clearly wanting to say more. "Speak freely, Captain. I've been following what happened. The media coverage, the controversy. I felt responsible. I was the one who said it out loud that first time. You didn't do anything wrong. You recognized a fellow service member. That reporter's reaction was her choice, not your fault. Still, I wanted to apologize for putting you in that position." I looked at him directly. "Captain, you served with distinction in a mission that cost us 2 Marines. You survived, came home, continued serving. You don't owe me an apology for recognizing that shared experience." His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you, ma'am." We talked for a few more minutes about his current assignment, his career trajectory, the usual professional catch-up between officers who'd served together. Before he left, he said something that stayed with me. "Brooks reached out last month. He's teaching at Quantico now. And I found Anderson, he's working contract security overseas. We're thinking about getting together, maybe next year. All of us who were there that night. He met my eyes. We'd like you to be part of that, ma'am. When you're ready. A reunion. The survivors coming together to remember what we'd shared, who we'd lost. My throat tightened. I'd like that, Captain. When the time is right. That evening, I attended the formal dinner that accompanied these training events. Officers from a dozen nations, dress uniforms, careful diplomacy mixed with genuine camaraderie. I found myself seated next to a French colonel named Dubois who'd spent years in French special operations. Colonel Vale, he said in excellent English, I hear you have experience coordinating complex extractions under hostile conditions. Some, I replied carefully. I would value your perspective on a training scenario we're developing. Similar parameters, team compromised, hostile territory, limited support options. Would you be willing to consult? It was an honest professional request, the kind of collaboration these events were designed to foster. We spent the next hour discussing theoretical scenarios, tactical options, command decision frameworks. He never asked about specific operations, never pushed for classified information. Just sought professional expertise from someone who'd been there. Later, walking back to my quarters, I realized something had changed. For months, I'd been defensive, protective, carefully guarding my service record from public exploitation. But here, among people who understood operational realities, I could share knowledge without fear of it being sensationalized or misused. This was what Melissa Crane had never understood. Military professionals didn't hide their experiences out of shame or inadequacy. We compartmentalized because context mattered. Because what we learned in combat had value, but only when shared with people who could use it appropriately. The next morning, I ran into the event coordinator in the cafeteria. He was a Navy captain named Wilson, someone I'd worked with on previous joint exercises. Colonel, I wanted to check in about yesterday, he said. Using your call sign in the introduction. I realized that might have put you on the spot, given recent media attention. It was fine, Captain Wilson. Different context entirely. He nodded, relieved. I thought so, but wanted to make sure. The thing is, when I was compiling background information on presenters, your designation came up in several operational reports. Officers who'd worked with you or reviewed your missions spoke very highly of your work. I felt it was relevant context for this audience. I appreciate that. There's talk of having you present at the Senior Leadership Conference next spring. Advanced Operational Command, that sort of thing. Would you be interested? A year ago, I would have declined immediately. Too much visibility, too much risk of renewed media attention. But now, with the story finally settled into something manageable, with Melissa's self-correction having shifted the narrative. Send me the details, I said. I'll consider it. The training event continued for another week. I gave 2 more presentations, participated in scenario planning workshops, consulted on several theoretical operations. Officers sought my input, respected my expertise, treated me as exactly what I was, a senior commander with relevant experience. No one called me cute. No one questioned my qualifications. No one asked me to justify my rank or explain how a woman ended up in classified operations. On the final day, there was a closing ceremony. Awards for outstanding contributions to the training, recognition of exemplary cooperation, the usual diplomatic flourishes that ended these events. I received a commendation from the overall exercise commander, a 2-star general from the U.S. Army. As he pinned it to my uniform, he said quietly, "Outstanding work, Colonel. Your presentations were among the most valuable we've had." The room applauded, polite, professional acknowledgement. I saluted, returned to my seat, and felt something loosen in my chest. This was what legacy actually looked like. Not television broadcasts or magazine articles. Not public debate about gender and military service. Just professional respect earned through competence and freely given among equals. After the ceremony, I found a quiet spot outside to call General Monroe. "Sir, the training event went well. I think there might be value in me taking on more of these joint operations presentations." "I agree," Monroe said. "You've handled the past year with exceptional professionalism, Harper. Time to let that experience benefit the broader military community." "Yes, sir." "And Harper?" Off the record, I'm proud of how you navigated this. A lot of officers would have either lashed out or gone into hiding. You kept your head up and did your job. That's leadership. After we hung up, I sat for a while watching the sun set over the training facility. Officers walked past, some nodding greetings, others deep in conversation about the week's exercises. This was my world. These were my people. Not the television cameras or social media commentators, but the professionals who understood what service actually meant. Melissa Crane's article had been right about one thing: I'd been tested and found solid. Not because I justified myself to her or the public, but because I'd refused to let outside pressure change who I was or how I led. The noise had been loud for a while. But noise always fades. What remained was the work, the mission, the quiet respect of those who actually understood. That was enough. That was everything. Today, I don't do interviews. The requests still come, not as frequently as they did during the height of the controversy, but they haven't stopped entirely. Documentary producers want to explore women breaking barriers in military service. Podcasters want me to discuss leadership under scrutiny. Academic researchers want to include my story in studies about media representation of female officers. I decline them all. Politely, firmly, with the same standard response Major Tate perfected months ago. My service record speaks for itself to those who need to know. Everyone else gets the public version: rank, position, years of service. Nothing more. Command at Camp Trident continues with the same rhythm it had before Melissa Crane's van pulled up to our gate. Morning formations, training exercises, operational planning, the countless small decisions that keep a military installation running smoothly. The Marines under my authority do their jobs with excellence. That's what matters. But something did change, subtle and deep. I'm more careful now about what visibility means, more deliberate about when and how I engage beyond the fence line. Not out of fear, but out of understanding that some lessons have to be learned the hard way. Lieutenant Blake Owens, now Captain Owens, stopped by my office last week. He's preparing for his first command position, anxious about the weight of it. "How do you handle it, ma'am?" he asked. "Knowing that every decision you make affects real lives, real careers?" I thought about Kandahar, about Martinez and Kim, about the impossible calculations you make when there are no good options. "You do the best you can with the information you have," I told him. "You listen to your team, trust your training, and accept that you won't always get it right. The weight doesn't get lighter. You just get stronger at carrying it." He nodded slowly. "And when people question your decisions, when outsiders think they know better, then you remember that the only opinions that matter are from the people who were there, who understand the context, who share the consequences." I paused. "Everyone else is just noise." He left looking steadier. That's what mentorship is: passing forward the lessons learned through mistakes and survival, hoping the next generation can build on what you figured out. I still have the photograph from Kandahar in my desk drawer. 6 faces, 3 of them gone now. I don't look at it often anymore. Don't need to. Those faces are permanent fixtures in my memory, appearing whenever I make a difficult decision or question whether the cost was worth it. Sometimes Captain Reyes sends brief messages. Updates on his career, questions about tactical problems he's working through, occasional mentions of Brooks or Anderson and what they're doing. We're planning that reunion he mentioned, sometime next year, when schedules align. A quiet gathering, no cameras, just the people who were there remembering what we survived and who we lost. That's where the truth lives. Not in television segments or magazine articles, but in the spaces between people who shared something words can't quite capture. Last month, I received a package from Melissa Crane. No note, just a book, her newly published work on military journalism and media ethics. My copy had a simple inscription on the title page: "Thank you for the education." MC, I read it over a weekend. It was good work, honest and thorough, using her experience with me as a case study in how journalists can fail when they prioritize narrative over truth. She'd interviewed dozens of military personnel, examined historical coverage of various operations, built a framework for more responsible reporting on classified activities. The section about our interaction was difficult to read. She'd included details I'd forgotten or chosen not to remember, the exact expression on my face when she'd called me cute, the tension in the Marines who'd witnessed it, the way she deliberately pushed boundaries to create drama. But she owned it completely. No excuses, no justification. Just clear acknowledgement of how her ambition had overridden her judgment and what she'd learned from the failure. I sent her a brief email. Read your book. Important work. Thank you for doing it right this time. She responded within hours. That means more than you know. I hope I've earned back at least some credibility with the community I failed. I didn't reply to that. Credibility isn't something you earn back with one good book. It's rebuilt slowly through consistent better choices over time. But she was making those choices now, and that counted for something. General Monroe retired last spring. At his ceremony, he pulled me aside. Harper, you've got a real shot at making general officer ranks. The right people have noticed your work, not the media circus, the actual work. Don't let what happened make you cautious. The Corps needs leaders who can weather storms without losing their bearing. Yes, sir. Thank you. And if you do make it, remember, the higher you go, the louder the noise gets. But also remember what you already proved. You don't have to listen to it. His words stayed with me. Not as pressure or expectation, but as recognition. I'd been tested in a way most officers never face, not by enemy fire or tactical complexity, but by the peculiar cruelty of public judgment. And I'd held steady. Every now and then, I catch someone whisper it. Usually at conferences or training events, when people are checking name tags and making connections. Viper 1. Not as gossip or rumor, but as respect. Recognition of something earned that doesn't need explanation. Those moments used to make me uncomfortable. Now they just are. Part of who I am, part of what I carry, neither something to hide nor something to advertise. Just truth, acknowledged when relevant and left alone when it's not. Yesterday, a young female lieutenant sought me out after a briefing. She looked nervous, kept adjusting her uniform. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. How do you deal with people who don't take you seriously because you're a woman? I'd heard variations of this question 100 times. Usually, I gave a diplomatic answer about proving yourself through performance. But something about her expression, equal parts determination and doubt, made me pause. You know what I learned? I said, some people will never take you seriously, regardless of what you do or prove. You can't control that. What you can control is whether you take yourself seriously. Whether you hold yourself to the same standard you'd hold any officer. Whether you make decisions based on what's right rather than what will make people respect you. She nodded, absorbing this. The people whose respect actually matters, the ones who've served, who understand the work, they'll recognize competence when they see it. Everyone else? I shrugged. Their opinions don't affect your ability to do your job. Even when they're loud about it? Especially then. Noise is just noise, Lieutenant. Focus on the signal. She thanked me and left, walking a little straighter. Maybe she'd remember that conversation someday when she faced her own moment of public scrutiny. Maybe it would help. That's what legacy is, I've come to understand. Not the dramatic moments that make headlines, but the quiet accumulation of choices and lessons passed forward. The way you handle pressure shapes how others will handle it when their turn comes. I still think about that day sometimes. The morning that started with a simple PR assignment and ended with my call signs spoken aloud on camera, with cute echoing in my ears, with everything I'd kept carefully compartmentalized suddenly exposed to judgment. If I could go back, would I change anything? Handle it differently? No. Because responding would have legitimized the premise that I owed explanations, that my service was up for public debate, that external validation mattered more than professional competence. Staying silent was the hard choice, but it was the right one. The story found its resolution not through my defense, but through time and truth. Through Melissa's eventual understanding, through the veteran community support, through the steady continuation of work that spoke louder than any words I could have offered. People think power is loud. They imagine authority as something projected, demonstrated, proven in dramatic gestures. But I've learned the strongest form of power is quiet. It's the officer who doesn't need to justify their rank because their competence is self-evident. It's the leader who can absorb criticism without reacting, who can face skepticism without becoming defensive. It's the professional who knows their worth isn't determined by public opinion. Unshaken, unbothered, undeniable. Last week, I walked through Camp Trident during evening formation. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parade ground. Marines stood at attention, crisp and professional, representing everything this institution stands for at its best. A young private caught my eye as I passed. He looked nervous, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. I stopped. "Something on your mind, Marine?" "Ma'am, I wanted to say thank you for showing us how to handle things with dignity. My sister is thinking about joining, and I told her about you. About how you didn't let anyone make you small." His words hit unexpectedly hard. I'd never thought about it that way. That silence could be seen as refusing to be diminished rather than simply avoiding conflict. "Tell your sister the Corps needs good Marines," I said. "Gender doesn't determine that. Character does." "Yes, ma'am." He saluted. I returned it, then continued my walk. That exchange, random, unplanned, just a private and a colonel crossing paths during routine evening duties, that mattered more than any interview I could have given. Because it was real. Because it was about service, not spectacle. My phone buzzed with a text from Captain Reyes. Just 2 words, January confirmed. The reunion. All of us who survived that night in Kandahar, finally coming together after years of scattered assignments and careful distance. Part of me dreads it, confronting those memories directly, seeing the spaces where Martinez and Kim should be standing. But another part needs it. Needs to acknowledge what we shared with people who actually understand. I replied, "I'll be there." 3 words. Simple commitment. But weighted with everything unsaid. Tonight, I'll finish the day's paperwork, review tomorrow's training schedule, respond to the dozen small issues that require command attention. Routine work, unglamorous and essential. The kind of thing that never makes news but keeps the military functioning. And tomorrow, I'll wake up and do it again. Let Marines make decisions, carry the responsibility of command with the same steady focus I've maintained for 15 years. No cameras. No commentary. No need to prove anything to anyone except the people who depend on my judgment. Cute, Melissa Crane had called me once, in a moment of condescension she later came to regret. But the Marines I command? They call me Colonel. They call me Ma'am. And somewhere in classified files that will stay sealed for decades, in operational reports that only certain people will ever read, they call me Viper One. Not because I demanded recognition. Not because I fought for visibility. But because I earned it in a valley in Kandahar where the only witnesses were the people whose lives depended on my decisions. That's the legacy I'm building. Not in headlines or social media debates, but in the quiet spaces where real work happens. In the training of junior officers who'll face their own challenges. In the execution of missions that will never be publicly acknowledged. In the steady maintenance of standards that make this institution function. The noise has faded now. The controversy that once seemed overwhelming has settled into background static, occasionally mentioned, but no longer defining. What remains is the work. The mission. The unshakable foundation of professional competence that no amount of public scrutiny can undermine. I stand in my office at Camp Trident, looking out at the base I've commanded for 3 years. The lights of barracks and admin buildings glow against the darkening sky. Marines moving between posts, vehicles on routine patrol, the organized rhythm of military life continuing as it always has. This is where I belong. Not in television studios or magazine features, but here. Leading Marines. Serving with honor. Maintaining the quiet dignity that defines real strength. Melissa got her story eventually. Just not the one she originally wanted. She wanted drama, conflict, a referendum on women in combat leadership wrapped in controversy and clickable content. Instead, she got a lesson. One she was humble enough to learn from, even if it took months of reflection and professional failure to get there. As for me, I got reminded of something I already knew but had to prove again, that integrity isn't performance. That leadership isn't about managing public opinion. That the strongest stance is sometimes refusing to engage at all. I turn off my office lights and lock the door. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to serve. Tonight, I'll rest with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I held my ground when it mattered most. The story is over. The work continues. And for those who need to know, who've earned the right to understand what that call sign actually means, the truth stands firm and clear. I am Colonel Harper Vale. I served with honor. I lead with integrity. I protect what matters without seeking credit for doing so. Everything else is just noise. And I learned long ago how to tune out noise and focus on the signal. Here's where I'll leave it. I stood my ground, kept the mission first, and let the truth speak quietly. If this resonated, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder to hold their line. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been talked down to or dismissed in public? What did you do? What's one boundary you set that changed the dynamic immediately? If you were there at Camp Trident, what would you have said to the reporter? Do you think silence can be stronger than clapping back? When and why? Drop your city and your one-word takeaway below. Mine's Viper.